There is a road in Birchington-on-Sea that carries a name most people walk past without question. It's a small woodland area used by local dog walkers. It's somewhere where children dart between the trees. That's where that comes from. So I'm just walking along Albion Road in Birchington, approaching Neame Road, which is a little unmade road. And it leads through to Neame Woods. A bit further down. And now we're into Neame Woods. And somewhere in here, there are 3 oak trees. Now, I'm not an expert on trees by any means. I'm going to try and find them, but even if you don't find them, they are in here somewhere. And they're significant in that they're a good habitat, apparently, for bats and other wildlife. And they've been here a long time. And maybe, perhaps over there in distance. Lovely little passageways. Kind of reminds me of the Lord of the Rings. Imagine travelling out of Hobbiton. Neame Road and Neame Woods in Birchington-on-Sea carry the name of one of East Kent's most significant landed families, a family whose presence in Thanet, Canterbury and the wider Kentish countryside stretches back to at least 1400. They were substantial landowners, hop growers, agricultural leaders. The Neames left their mark on the economy and the landscape, and at the heart of it there are 3 ancient oak trees, and it seems they've been there longer than anybody can remember. So I'll ask you the question, what connects all of this to Britain's oldest brewery, a dynasty of hop-growing landowners? And that's part of the deep identity of the Isle of Thanet. So stay with me, folks. This is the story of Neame Road and Neame Woods, and it's about much more than just a street sign. Welcome again to Peace Unplugged. There's a quiet, residential, unmade little road in the centre of Birchington, which leads on to a narrow green woodland. It's been part of the village of Birchington, quietly getting on with life since the 13th century. But this place, Neame Road and Neame Woods, with 3 oak trees standing at its heart, holds that story that connects to a Kentish brewery dynasty. That's centuries of land ownership. And it's one of the most quietly powerful examples of the heritage that exists on the Isle of Thanet. My name is Marty, and this, as I said, is Peace Unplugged, the podcast where we go slowly and we dig deeply and find out what this place is really made of. To understand why the road and the woodland carry the Neame name, we need to travel back in time, not to a single dramatic moment, but to a quiet accumulation of land. A bit of an open area here. Perhaps somebody might be able to tell me, let me know what would be an oak tree compared to other trees. And this little path leads eventually through to what is Crisp Park. And perhaps this is more like an ancient oak tree. There are apparently 3, and this is possibly one of them. of influence and belonging that shaped the whole of East Kent, and that goes right across the 18th and 19th centuries. The Neame family have a history in Kent stretching back to at least the early 15th century. Genealogical records suggest that Thomas Neame first acquired the land around 1400, and what followed was patient and steady growth, and that is a family that has become embedded in the agricultural and commercial life of this corner of England. They were, as contemporary records describe them, landowners of substance. They farmed, they traded, they grew hops. That's the essential Kentish ingredient, the crop that gave Kent its distinctive identity and that taste on a late summer's evening. The Neames were known and respected in Birchington and in Thanet, in Canterbury, in Woodnesborough, and in Goodnestone, right across the network of the parishes and the market towns that made up the social world of Kent. But it's one part of this extended family that gives us the clearest line to the name above the tree line here in Birchington. Charles Neame of Harefield Court and John Neame of Selling Court were identified by historians of that period as among the most significant hop growers in the whole of East Kent. Theirs were not small operations. These were estates that shaped the whole of the local community. They employed local people. They had influence, and that translated eventually into having the family name on places and roads and fields and landmarks of the community. When the spaces in Birchington were named, as the village grew through the Victorian era, it was natural or almost inevitable that the Neame name would find a place here. In the road, in the woodland, rooted down like those three oak trees, and that goes right into the fabric of life around here. Most people in Kent know the name Shepherd Neame, Britain's oldest brewery. Founded in Faversham in 1698 and still operating today, still on the same family line. But what is less known is the story of how the Neame family came to be part of that great institution and what it says about what kind of people they are. The Neame family were, by their own description, relative latecomers to brewery itself. The brewing story had already been running for generations under the Shepherd name before Percy Beale Neame joined the firm in 1864, aged just 28. But from the moment he stepped into that role, with the confidence and capability of a man whose family had been managing land and people for centuries, the future of the brewery was sealed as a Neame enterprise. Percy was not a man that just stumbled into good fortune. He was a product of a family tradition that understood land, investment, long-term thinking, and the particular discipline of Kent agriculture. His entry into what will become Shepherd Neame was as natural as the acorn falling into the fertile soil. And just as Neame grew to define Britain's oldest surviving brewery, still family-run, still rooted in Faversham, still drawing its water from the same artesian ancient well, so too did that name take root in the geography of the communities and the family called home. Here in Birchington-on-Sea, a quiet unmade road and a stand of trees carry that legacy forward. That's not in boardrooms or balance sheets, but it's in the way that local people walk their dogs, let their children play, and breathe the air. Whatever its origins as a named space, Neame Woods today is something more than a heritage footnote. It is a living, working, breathing space of community green space. And in a village the size of Birchington, that matters enormously. It's a place where you go to clear your head. It's where you let the dogs run. It's where children discover what mud is, what it feels like. It's a place where, on a pale winter morning, the light through the bare branches makes something in us quietly settle. This piece of woodland sits alongside Crisp Park. It's a very pleasant recreational space, a park that was created in the 1980s, previously just a cabbage field, as I remember it. So the woods and the park are easy walking distance from the centre of the village. It's part of our coastal community, and this community in Birchington already recognises its value. There are groups that actively keep Crisp Park and Neame Woods litter-free, Now that's telling about how we feel about this area. It shows how locals really care. I love this little area. And then, of course, there's the oak trees. Now, when I walked into the woods, I could only actually find one of those trees, but apparently there are 3 in total. And if you know anything about the history of oak trees, you already know that 3 is not just a number. It's a statement. The oak is England's national tree. It's a symbol of strength, its endurance and rootedness for as long as people have been attaching the meaning to the natural world. The word druid, the ancient priestly class of Celtic Britain, is thought to derive from the old word for oak. These sacred oaks were the temple of Old England. To ancient Greeks and Norse, the oak was associated with the gods of thunder. That's Zeus, Jupiter, and Thor, perhaps because oaks, as the tallest living features in many landscapes, were so often struck by lightning. In England, Charles II hid from parliamentarian soldiers in an oak tree at Boscobel in 1651, and the nation thereafter gave that escape its own celebrations. That's Royal Oak Day, still remembered as Oak Apple Day, held each year on the 29th of May. Ancient kings wore crowns of oak leaves. Couples wed beneath oak trees during the Cromwell period, and that was when church ceremonies were, of course, outlawed. The oak was quite literally the tree under which life was lived. But in Birchington's Neame Woods, the 3 oaks carry a more local story. Alongside all of that heritage weight, 3 oaks point to an older pattern of land management in Thanet. And here we have Chris Park, the back of where I live, which wasn't much more than a cabbage field when I was a lad. So Neame Woods and Neame Road, a name that's known locally in Birchington very well, and is linked to Shepherd Neame, who are the local brewers, and they have a big place in Faversham. Beautiful summer's day. I've just come back from the Gentlemen's Probus Club lunch today, which was held in the Smugglers Restaurant on the Canterbury Road in Birchington, and that restaurant was originally a house, I believe, owned by the Neame family, as is another house where a friend of mine lives called Mulberry House, which was also anciently owned by the Neame family. The Neame family having been farmers in this area when most of Birchington was farmland, but one of the Neame family decided to start brewing, and that's where that comes from. Before the enclosures, before the Victorian development, before Neame Road was a road at all, this corner of Birchington was agricultural land, and field boundaries were often marked with trees. Individual oaks planted at corners, landmark trees that told a farmer or a shepherd or a labourer where one piece of land ended, another piece started. When the land was built upon and the roads were cut, those boundary trees often remained. Were too large to move and too valuable as a habitat. So the oaks of Neame Woods may have been exactly that, survivors of an earlier landscape, a Kentish countryside that existed before the village took its present shape. They are, in the truest sense, living witnesses to history, older than the road that now carries the Neame name, older perhaps than the Neame's family's presence in Birchington itself. We talk a lot these days about the importance of green space, about nature and about mental health, about having somewhere to go when the noise of daily life becomes too much. The research is clear and consistent. Studies from the Woodland Trust, from De Montfort University, from peer-reviewed journals across Europe and beyond, that all point in the same direction. Spending time in woodland and green space lowers stress hormones. It reduces anxiety and depression. It improves mood. It improves sleep. It improves the way we handle the inevitable difficulties that daily life place in our path. One landmark study found that adults who spend just 2 hours or more in nature each week reported measurably better health and well-being than those who did not. Another, drawing on research across 50 studies, found that nature-based activities consistently improve low mood and reduce anxiety across all participants, regardless of age or background. There is forest bathing. That's the Japanese practice of simply being present in woodland, using all the senses, moving slowly. It's been shown to lower blood pressure as well as cortisol levels. And while we may not have a Japanese phrase for it in Birchington, people have been doing this activity in Neame Woods for generations, walking slowly, breathing deeply, watching the light change through the oak canopy. This is not a new discovery. It is in fact very old knowledge. That's the same knowledge that made the Druids hold their ceremonies in oak groves, that made communities plant trees, particularly at the boundaries of places they cared about. Think about that for a moment. That makes preserving trees as much as possible well worth protecting. It is in fact a local matter that any time a tree does need to be taken down in the Birchington area, there is a pledge to plant at least 2 to 3 trees in its place. So let's bring together what we found out today. Neame Road and Neame Woods in Birchington-on-Sea carry the name of one of East Kent's most significant landed families, a family whose presence in Thanet, Canterbury and the wider Kentish countryside stretches back to at least 1400. They were substantial landowners, hop growers, agricultural leaders. The Neames left their mark on the economy and the landscape in this part of England across 5 centuries. Through Percy Beale Neame's entry into the Faversham brewery in 1864, the family became intrinsically linked with Shepherd Neame, Britain's oldest brewery, and that brewery still draws water from the same well. The Neame family connection to this place is not merely historical. It's living, it's ongoing, and it's tangible. In Birchington, that connection is expressed not in marble or bronze, but in a quiet residential road, a narrow community woodland, and 3 ancient oak trees that may well predate the Neame connection to this land entirely. The 3 oaks were the boundary markers. They may be the remnants of hedgerows that once divided Thanet's farming land. What they certainly are is survivors, living rooted, enduring examples of the kind of continuity that local history makes visible, if we are willing to look slowly, enough so to see it. There's something important about that slowness. We live in a world that moves quickly, that constantly demands our attention, that fills every silence with noise. And against that, what does Neame Woods offer? That's something deceptively simple. It's a place to pause. It's a canopy to stand under, an oak to put your hand against, or feel something older than anything you have ever worried about. The evidence of what green space does for us is well established, but the evidence that matters most is the kind that you feel in your chest when the bird's song is loud and the morning light is doing something beautiful through the leaves. That is not data. That is lived experience. And it's been happening in places like this, in woodland spaces on the Isle of Thanet, in the shadow of ancient oaks for as long as people have lived here. The Neame family, of course, helped shape that landscape. And we, today, are the latest in a very long line of people who have walked that ground and found it quietly and reliably good for the soul. This is Birchington-on-Sea. This is Peace Unplugged. And this road, these trees, this small, remarkable place is part of what makes where you live worth knowing. Thank you again for listening and watching my podcast. Take care. Next time you walk through a woods, take time to notice those trees. Take time to imagine what it would have been like to have been there when they were much smaller, much younger. Take time to think about the people that walked through that area. Smuggler's Restaurant, which was also known as the Smuggler's Tea Rooms on Point. That's it from me. Bye for now.